Hey guys, and welcome to a new video. Today I want to talk about the next project, which is a Bleed Bow Cyan. Okay, so first of all, I want to mention some try-hard tryouts in terms of build theory crafting or playing the game, which are the builds that I have played in the past a couple of days or the past week, basically. Usually, I really try to bring every single build that I'm trying to YouTube, showing you guys what I've been working on and so on. But since we have now the cluster jewels and they bring so freaking much variety, I was trying out a lot of different weird builds. For example, a spectral shield throw Deadeye, basically focusing on Impale and some Explo stuff. But in the end, with more than 500 exalts invested into the character, I could barely reach about, let's say, 2 million shape per DPS, which is for that amount of budget kind of ridiculous, right? Then going over to the 15 Impale stacks champion spectral throw. So with the Megalomaniacs, for example, we have still a bunch over here. You could reach, where do I have them? Deep Cuts. So with these jewels, Deep Cuts is sitting on a large cluster jewel, okay? But with the Megalomaniacs, you can actually get even more Deep Cuts, more Impale stacks to your character, and using the Champion Ascendancy, I could reach 15 Impale stacks with about 180% increased effect of Impale, which ended up about 420% more damage just from the Impale, which was a pretty neat idea, but in the end, yeah. Character had roughly 3k life in Delirium. That's kind of not the best idea. The problem is when I go for a build and I have an idea, I really go all in on these builds, right? I know it's probably better to just stick on like 9 Impales or 11 Impales and build in some other strategies, but I said like, hey, if I want to go max Impale, I go max Impale, no matter the cost or no matter what I have to sacrifice. But these were like unplayable at this point, right? But the damage was still great, as you can imagine. And next on the list was then some kind of Gladiator, Savior Paradoxica, Cyclone Impaler, which I built out of the Champion, basically, which was just boring since I just played Savior Paradoxica, Cyclone. It's nothing new, you know, and after like playing like 3 or 4 hours of Cyclone, I was already bored with the character because I just wanted to bring something fresh and new, especially now since we have the cluster jewels. So next on the list was some kind of Bleed Lacerate Gladiator. So the problem, or at least I personally, I really love damage over time builds. You know, Essence Drain, Contagion, Poison, for example, which was my league starter this league. So now I want to try something with Bleed. And instead of going like max block or block Bleed Lacerate, I tried to make a version coming with a two-handed weapon, and I crafted some over here, which is this weapon here with the Bleed modifier, trying to go really ham on the Bleed stacks. I think my path of building said something about 8 or 9 million Bleed DPS using a two-handed weapon, which was kind of nuts. But the character was not smooth at all to play just because of the attack speed. So Lacerate only feels good if you have a shit ton of attack speed. And with a two-handed weapon without multi-strike, the Lacerate on the Gladiator felt like very shitty, you know, it was like really not the best. So I was thinking about, okay, what if we take Bleed and we're gonna use a bow for it? You know, Bleed bow is something that is usually very strong as league starters and as an end game content clearer, and most of the builds are using the Gladiator Ascendancy because of the Bleed pops and stuff like that. So what I wanted to do is a character that is going to be a block bow character using the Rearguard quiver, which is a quiver or the only quiver that can give you block chance, and this one goes for a chaos, so pretty budget here on this part, but it gives you block attack and block spell damage. Initially, I wanted to go for a max block Gladiator on this build, but then I found out, or at least I haven't really thought about block things at all. Blocking with a bow is not easy at all, right? The problem is if you go for block nodes on the tree, you know, these are shield nodes, these are dual wield nodes. Here we have dual wield nodes, here we have shield nodes. Here we have, I don't know, like this is not even a block node. Here we have another shield node. So basically, the only two builds that can properly block is a shield character or a dual wield character. While dual wield is a little bit harder because you start with 15% block chance as dual wielder, but in the end you have a lot of nodes that can get up your block chance, especially as a gladiator where your block attack damage is equal to your block spell damage. So the only thing you have to worry about is block attack damage, and if you just sack that with using the red nightmare and stuff, you can easily get to max block. So then we have the problem that as a gladiator, if I want to go max block, I can use that attack is equal to spell block, but the problem is there is not a lot of sources to get global block, and that's why I decided to roll a Scion, because the Scion, as the gladiator ascendancy, has chance to block attack damage and chance to block spell damage, together with some more bleeding effect and blind on hit, which is super nice. And this block here that we have is global. So it means with the gladiator ascendancy and the rear guard, which is also like global mods here, we already have like some 39% chance to block on its own, basically, right? Just to mention here why I did not pick the gladiator for this project. So then talking about the cluster jewels, there is some cluster jewels that are called Flexible Sentry, which also gives you global block attack and global block spell damage. And if you really want to go crazy on it, you can actually pick up the Necromancer Ascendancy and use Spirit Offering, because Spirit Offering also gives you a global chance to attack and block, but I haven't found out a lazy way to build this one in, because I'm not willing to self-cast, Desecrate, and Spirit Offering that I can maintain my max block. So this is just a super try thing here on this build, but I'm really looking forward, and it has some really nice damage. Good. I would say enough talking for now. Let's talk about the build a little bit later. Let's just run a Breachstone over here. So I leveled this character up yesterday. We currently have about, I don't know, 8 hours playtime. We're currently level 80. And this is kind of like some tryout things here. These are like budget things here. We have the Nomad, for example, not really expensive. The gloves and boots are like 50 chaos, just life resistance, nothing else. Praxis is still from my leveling. The Karui ward is still from my leveling gear. So don't expect too much, because we haven't crafted anything specific yet. Or at least a little bit on the bow, but I'm gonna talk about this one a little bit later. And we're also gonna use the Exile helm, which is new in this league, basically. And this thing is actually just insanely nuts. Let me quickly pull up the helm over here, if I write it correctly. Asylum PoE. There we go. So what this helm does is it gives you the snipe skill, right? And if we check out the snipe skill, there you're gonna see this kills arrow deal 120% more damage with ailments per stage, okay? And some hits per ailment, stuff like that, you know? But that means, just if we take the first line, obviously the second line will count, because our initial hit will be the bleed, what do you say, the calculating the base version or the base damage of the bleed. But if we're just gonna focus on this first line, 120% more damage with ailments per stage. That means I have my puncture in here, and if I now load up my snipe here, then you see that I'm getting stages. And the more attack speed that I have, the more stages can I get. So 6 stages is the maximum. And the weird, or the crazy thing is, if we now calculate 120% more damage per stage times 6 is 720% more damage with ailments based from the puncture now, basically. And it would basically translate, if you say like, how much damage does a support gem give you? Let's say Vicious Projectiles gives you 57% more physical damage over time. Then Deadly Ailment, 62% more damage. So basically, roughly said, let's say every support gem will give you about 50% more damage, right? And 720% more damage would be equivalent to like 12 or 13 support gems, plus the 4 that we have in here, which is Vicious Projectile, Deadly Ailments, and Brutality. So basically, easy said, if you soak up your snipe with 6 charges, you're basically shooting an arrow that causes a bleed supported by like 15 support gems. And this is insane damage. So let's just run this Breachstone now. So we're using Split Aura here to cause our bleedings. At the moment, we're not having an exploit chest. You have to think about, if you want to play this build on a budget, then you're safe to go with the Gladiator. Gladiator with the bleed pops will give you some really, really nice clearing. And it will definitely be League starter viable. It is definitely budget, but I'm here. I want to bring the Bleed Bow Gladiator to a new version using the rear guard, trying to get some max block, maybe some ailment immunity. We can have poison immunity through the Shikari Keystone, the upgraded Pantheon. So there is other ways, for example, the Malevolence Watcher's Eye that will give us bleed immunity. And if we reach 100% ailment immunity, then we are complete immune to all ailments, which is a lot of quality of life, because there is no freeze, no chill, no brittle, no sap, no ignite, no nothing that can actually harm you, because you're gonna avoid all of these things at all, basically, right? So, as I said, if you have a tight budget, then you're good off with the Gladiator, but I want to bring this character to the next level, basically, when it comes to bleed characters. That's why I'm using the Scion, trying to get the max block, trying to get maybe even Chaos Resistance capped, something like that. We're gonna see how this project will work out in the end once I started to level this character up even further. As I said, level 80 at the moment. And I want to try to bring in a lot of weird and cool mechanics in the character itself. But for it, more budget. More of my budget, better said, right? So we talk about like 200-300 exalts maybe. That we're gonna invest into the character, trying to see what's possible these days with the cluster jewels in terms of bleeding. But as you see for the mapping showcase, just like run around, your bleed will take care of everything. And if you're wondering, hey mbX, bleed pops would be so much better. Yeah, it would, but I'm planning to use an exploit chest, so we're gonna use the exploit chest to yeah, trivialize for the missing bleed expo from the Gladiator. Sorry. First, a small explanation before we go for the boss. As you saw, the split arrow damage is okay, but was not top-notch, right? So, now we are going to use some ensnaring arrows using the artillery support. I think artillery was it called? Ballistic Totem. So we're gonna have these Ballistic Totems. They are going to shoot the ensnaring arrow, which makes the target moving, although it's standing still. But I'm going to explain this a little bit later, just if you're wondering what I'm doing here. So what we're gonna do now is we're just gonna go in here, load up this one, and shoot it once, and then instant dead, basically. So that is the power of an actual budget gear using snipe with puncture, which is insane. So yes, I know, it was just a normal breach, Exalt's breach, but based on my budget gear and based that I'm not even using cluster jewels yet or anything like that, the damage is just absolutely ridiculous. So let's talk about bleed a little bit before we're gonna continue talking about the gear, what I'm planning to use or what I'm using right now. So basically, if you make a physical attack, so bleed is a physical ailment, so it scales with all the ailment modifiers, and basically you shoot an arrow and 70% of that damage that you just made is the base damage basically from the bleeding, and this will then count as damage per time over the course of 5 seconds. So there is basically 2 versions, if not 3 versions, if I mention the Faura's gloves, but let's keep on the 2 versions for now. So you have the standard bleed build, which is just bleeding enemy 70% of your damage over 5 seconds, blah blah blah, which then gets increased by 140% if the target is moving, okay? But you can only have one single bleed stack on the enemy. So basically, you have your normal bleed. If the target is moving, then it takes another 140%. So you basically end up having 210. So 70% of the base bleed, and if the target is moving plus 140 is 210% damage from the bleed. So the other version would be using Crimson Dance. So Crimson Dance means that your bleed damage is halved, but you can have 8 stacks. But if the enemy is moving, there is no other effect. So if we're going to calculate this now, let's say we have like 1,000,000 bleed damage, right? This is the single bleed. Then we have basically times, let's say, 3.1, I think, should be 200, yeah, I think like 3 million DPS, let's say, with the bleeding if the enemy is moving. That's basically the 210% increased. So if we're gonna use the Crimson Dance now, we have like 1,000,000 divided by 2 and then times 8. So you see that the Crimson Dance will actually be more DPS when it comes to fully stacks. The problem is the normal bleed feels a lot better when you're clearing targets, when you're mapping, because how often does it happen that you hit a target for 8 times straight when you're mapping? The only thing you do, shoot once and that's it, and then run. So basically the normal bleeding will do double the damage that you would do if you have Crimson Dance, or if you would have Crimson Dance. So as I said, you want to have the target moving to take increased damage. So basically, I think Crimson Dance soaks up like 280% increased damage, while the moving bleeding target with one stack has like 210%. So yes, in a version where you're a single target, a boss, and you hit him more for eight times, for example, you're gonna do more damage with the Crimson Dance, but the normal usual bleed feels better if you're just mapping, for example. Good. Now we have this new Ballistic Totem that got released like last league or something, which is basically an arrow shooting totem. And here we have now the ensnaring arrow. So what does the ensnaring arrow do? It's basically, where does it say? Each snare applies less movement speed to the target. Wait a second. The core message here, where is it? Ensnaring enemies always count as moving. Okay, so even like if I place this ballista now and it shoots on a target, the target can't stand still, but it counts as moving, which we can use for our bleed to have another 140% damage increase for the bleeding because the target is technically moving. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna use your Ballistic Totems in the start of a fight like I did on the Exhaust run, load up your snipe, and your snipe will basically do 200% base damage of the bleed because 70% as the natural plus 140 because the target count as moving towards the ensnaring arrow. So basically what I would say, I think with this helm, we're gonna have so freaking much damage that if we're gonna go Cyrus Awakener 8, for example, you know, like all the bosses do have face transitions, you know, for example, Shaper is talking to Sana about family problems and stuff, so that's enough time to just get up your ballisters and just load up your snipe, and as soon as the monster gets active, one shot will probably do, I don't know, like 10 million DPS or if not more. I have not calculated this one in the end stage, but I just saw on the Xof here when I did it yesterday with like level 68, I had ridiculous amounts of damage. So I think it's not necessary to go for Crimson Dance at all, because for the mapping aspect, the non-Crimson Dance version feels a lot better. And for bosses, we have the Assailant with Snipe, which is doing some ridiculous amounts of damage and will probably insta-phase almost every single encounter in the entire game. Good, let me quickly close my Discord because I'm getting spammed here. So, what am I using here? As I said, the Assailant with like a 720% more damage. It's actually even more because it's counting for the hit damage where the bleed is calculated, using Puncture, Vicious Projectiles, Deadly Ailments, and Brutality support. For our clearing skill, I use an Elder-based bow with jagged and corroded fossils. This is basically the same way as we crafted the poison weapon. We're using a corroded fossil to enable the bleed and the poison modifiers. Make sure that you have an elder base that is at least, I think, item level 83 or 85. Not sure. Please check out PoE database, because otherwise, actually, before I do misinformation here, PoEDB TV US, let's pull up the site here, because I really want to give you some legit information and not something that you probably have to research yourself. So we're gonna go for two-handed bows. We have the Elder version here. So you need the 9% more bleeding damage is item level 83, so I was correct on this one. So you need an Elder bow with item level 83, then you use the corroded fossil, which enables this bleed and or gives a higher chance to get the bleed modifiers here, because the mod itself sits now on the Elder base. And then we can have poison and bleed modifiers have a higher chance to roll, but we can disable the poison nodes using jagged fossil because it has no chaos modifiers, and as we know, poison will actually translate into chaos damage. So if you're using the corroded and jagged fossil in combination with a 2-slotted resonator, for example, then you can have a good shot on getting this 60% chance for bleeding, inflict 100% more damage, which is probably the best stat in the game when it comes to bleeding. So other stats that you're looking for is just the most amount of physical damage that you can have. I crafted this one yesterday, and I'm still too scared to use an annual because I'm fine with the prefixes. I have like tier 2 fizz damage and tier 2 bleeding damage, but the suffixes are not good at all with a 14 dexterity. But it's a 50-50 now to throw an annual on it and hopefully remove a suffix. Prefixes cannot be changed, scour off, multi-mod with 2 nice suffixes to make this weapon even better, but at the moment I'm fine with this one. I'm using here Split Arrow, Vicious Projectiles, Deadly Ailments, Mirage Archer, Pierce Support, and Brutality. The question is, I still need to test if Mirage Archer and Pierce is necessary, or is actually Chain feeling better than Pierce, or what about Chain Fork combination? I don't think that the Mirage Archer is necessary at all. It's questionable. These support gems, so basically you have your split arrow with vicious projectiles, deadly ailments, and brutality as your main 4-link, and then Mirage Archer and Pierce are just some quality of life. If you have a 5-link, then definitely take the Pierce or Chain, whatever you feel like. I'm not really feeling the Mirage Archer in this build at all, so maybe gonna skip that in the later stages. Then for the chest, at the moment I'm using a Carcass check. It's completely useless chest here. I'm usually using this one here as my better version of Tabula Rasa, but since I was lacking some resistance when I started these breach runs, I just throw in a Carcass check because it has some all resistance and I had it laying around on the stash anyways. So basically, count this one in as a Tabula Rasa at the moment. What I plan to do is getting an Explode chest, but I'm not entirely sure what the Explode chest should look like, because we can have Frenzy on hit, but since we're a Scion, we could take Raider and have this for free. If I want to say I can take an additional curse, for example, I could also take the Occultist as a side class, because the Juggernaut here is not necessary at all. I want to have the Gladiator because of the block, attack, and spell damage, the global block basically. But the second ascendancy is completely random, basically. I can take Pathfinder or Juggernaut here for the stun immunity, or going Necromancer with the offering skills, going Occultist for a curse, going, I don't know, I can like pretty much do whatever I want. But since I have not figured out yet what I want to do, that's why I just picked the Juggernaut, because the Assailant gives you a lot of accuracy rating as well. So usually these builds are RT builds, means hits cannot be evaded. You have always 100% chance to hit, but you cannot deal critical strikes. But with these two Ascendancies, I'm also having 100% chance to hit without RT. That makes me able to crit. I'm not focusing on crit, but therefore we could take some Tailwind Elusive Boots in the later stages of the game, because we still can crit and trigger those both. Not saying it is like very good uptime or something, needs to be tested, but we have the option to do so. Other than that, for the ailment immunity, I could also think about these what they are called, the boots with the maximum power charge and Death Door. They give you bleed immunity as well once you're not able to get the Malevolence bleed immunity Watcher's Eye. Good. For the chest, here is my auras: War Banner, Pride, Clarity, Malevolence, Enlighten, and Precision. The reason why I'm using Clarity is simple. I have a Watcher's Eye with minus mana cost to non-channeling skills. The plan would be to make my Split Arrow absolutely free from cost, using like rare rings and amulet with the minus like up to like 10 reduced or minus mana cost for non-channeling skills. The brutality, what is it? The snipe itself, I'm not even sure if this costs mana, because all of my things, I think this is a global mod, so if we unequip this one, it has 8 mana cost, so nothing really too fancy. So a Praxis Aura Ring will basically make this cost nothing at all. Good. Next here, still working on the right amount of gems here, because precision is useless, right? We are a non-crit build and we are accuracy capped, so precision is, unless you have a Watcher's Eye with like precision attack speed or something like that, this is a dead gem as well. So I want to bring in like Flesh and Stone maybe, or Herald of Purity or something like that. The end version will look different. This is just what I'm using right now, and I want to explain why I had those things in mind and what I will switch basically. Gloves is basically just like physical damage over time. This is a Hunter mod or an Elder mod. Basically, fist damage over time, life resistance. Sorry, is all what you need. Then I have here my Ballistic Totem with a GMP and Snaring Arrow and a maim support. So the enemy gets maim, takes increased physical damage from the sources, which is then getting more bleed damage at all. Then I have here the Nomad, which is basically my stat belt, because it's hard to get a lot of dexterity once you're choosing to go with some left-sided treat. All the dexterity nodes are somewhere at the right side. So this is basically my Headhunter placeholder. We have a lot of strength, dexterity, and in this case, we get more flask charges, elemental resistance, and projectile attack damage. If you want to go some nice DPS, definitely take a Reslatter's Coil, because this will give you a shit ton of DPS. Then for the boots, life resistance, I have here dash and a second wind support, and cast on death and portal. But I'm still deathless on this character, okay? Hardcore viable build for now, so I'm probably gonna switch this one to a cast when damage taking Mortal Call setup, or something that comes into my mind on later stages. Then, as I said, For the quiver, we're gonna use the rear guard, which gives you a chance to block attack damage, spell damage, projectile speed. Then we have projectile damage and armor rating as well. We're gonna see how well it will go once we're gonna focus on the block at all. Then for the helm, we already talked about that one. Again, puncture, vicious projectile, deadly ailments, brutality. Then for the rings, basically life resistance, can be Herald of Purity rings, can be minus mana cost rings, can be like pretty much everything. Once you have capped resistance, we're gonna see what we're gonna end up using here. And yeah, that's about it. For the flasks at the moment, Bleed Immunity Flask, Cinder Swallow, not the crit version, please take the life for each and one, but this one is like super nice to have with the Onslaught, but in the end we also gonna get Onslaught from the Slaughter here, so this is like not necessary at all. A Diamond Flask is a flask that I just had laying around with freeze immunity. I would probably assume that I'm taking something, where is my flasks? For example, a Dying Sun for the additional projectiles and some area of effect, something like that, or even a Witchfire Brew for the Spear Curse, because then enemies take also increased damage over time. You have a lot of choices here what you can do. Basically at the moment I was just focusing on trying to get anything done for leveling this character, but now we're gonna focus more into min-maxing the build with a lot more currency than that I spent into this one, and also with the perfect amount of flasks on top of that. So for the skill tree, basically at the moment starting as a Scion, taking here the all resistance nodes, a bunch of life nodes. Since we are not a crit build, we don't have to use any of the crit related nodes, which soaks up a lot of skill points if you do so. But now we have a lot of choices. I spec'd into every single life node for now, but we can remove those points and then getting the cluster jewels. For the cluster jewels, we're going to talk on the next video, basically on the update, once I figured out what cluster jewels I want to have and what cluster jewels are really good. I decided to go with the, where are they? I decided to go with the medium cluster jewels here with Rend and Wasting Affliction. Rend, damage over time, and Wasting Affliction, damaging ailments deal % faster. So what does that mean is basically you have 100% bleed damage over 5 seconds, basically, right? If you have like, let's say 100% damaging ailments faster will mean that the same amount of bleed damage that you would do usually over 5 seconds will be counted, or at least will be dealt in half of the time, basically. So the 100% damage will be dealt in 2.5 seconds, which is a way higher damage per second value, although the bleed itself will still do the same amount of damage. So this is just the ramp up is way faster and will deal the amount of damage way faster than it usually is. So Wasting Affliction, definitely, I'd plan to use 4 of these here, if not even 6. I could not really find a good large cluster jewel yet, so that leaves the question open, are we gonna use a Voices jewel and use them 6 times, which then gives me 60% faster. With the tree here, we probably get up to like 150% damaging ailments deal damage faster, which means my bleed will probably only last like a second or 1.5 seconds, but it will deal the full amount of damage in that small radius. Good, other than that, here I have some brute force solution just for the intelligence problems here. Then on the bottom side, I'm playing around with Thread of Hope using the very large cluster, using Iron Reflexes, Spirit Void for Mana Leech, Heavy Draw and Deadly Draw for the good bow nodes here, and Hematophagy for the Leech itself. Other than that, pretty standard generic tree. On the left tab, I have a Lionized Fall, which means that I'm converting all of the melee nodes or weapon nodes to bow nodes, which means this one Slaughter, for example, if I put this one out, these are all axe nodes here, and these are sword nodes. They are pretty sick though, with the damage of a time multiplier, the chance to bleeding, the damage of ailments, the onslaught and whatnot. But if you put in a Lionized Fall, which says melee type weapon modifiers in radius are transformed to bow modifiers, then it will count as bow, as you see here. Physical damage with bows, then we have physical damage with bows, attack speed with bows. So all of these nodes are not axe nodes anymore or sword nodes, they will be bow nodes. The only problem is this one cleaving does not count in, but for one single point we get a lot of damage increase and damage deal faster, as I explained before what that means basically. So it's definitely still worth to use the X node here, because the damaging faster is a global modifier and will also count for bows on top of that. Good. Other than that, nothing too special. I will remove a lot of these nodes here and then using the cluster jewels on this side here and probably on that side as well. So these are my two generic cluster jewel nodes. Path of building of this character is in the description below if you want to check it out. Good. Let's talk about the cosmetics real quick because this looks like really, really fancy. Today's released Dragon Hunter Bow with the Crusader weapon effect, some gore effect. We have a gore skull with some fiery eyes and the pitch black bandana. Then we have the Heartseeker wings, the Extinction body armor, gloves, and boots with the Ultimate Chaos character effect, the Bloodguard footprints, the quiver that comes with the bow, but it's kind of useless because as soon as you have wings equipped, this is the quiver here, this weird thing here. So if you remove that, you see what gets added here. But as soon as you use wings, the quiver is kind of disabled, even if you use wings that would show the quiver basically, right? So let's get back our Heartseeker wings here. Then we have what else is here? Dragon Hunter portal effect. Then we have like almost every aura disabled with the invisible buff effect because there is just like one single red aura, and this is basically the where we have it, the Carnage. Because the Void Emperor looks kind of good, but the problem with it is it deletes my FPS. Then we have the Demonic Split Arrow, Stygian Mirage Archer, and then the Wild Dash Flame effect. Good. As I said, path of building of the current state of the art is in the description below. There will be a ton of changes throughout the next couple of days when we start crafting some nice gloves, some maybe Tailwind elusive boots, maybe an Explode chest, some nice rings, maybe vulnerability on hit, or even the gloves with the High Templar gloves, like 5 times corrupted with like double curse, because temporal chains would also be a nice option to make my bleeds last longer and therefore deals more damage in total. But yeah, we're gonna see how this build is going to turn out once I gonna work towards every single aspect. If it's block, if it's ailment immunity, if it's a damage issue, what about the bow crafting in later stages, and so on. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed this kind of a theory craft video so you know what's going on for the next couple of days on this project. And yeah guys, thanks for tuning in, thanks for watching, and see you on the next video.